Are you stressed about a test that's coming up, or have you been super stressed before, so much so that you're like, why am I even doing this degree anymore, and I'm just going to quit school altogether? Well, we're going to talk about how you can never stress again taking tests on this video today. Hey, my name is Michael Thompson, and on this channel, we discuss personal and professional development from a Christian perspective. And our topic today is, how do you take tests without ever stressing? And there is a way to do it. I'm going to discuss different tips for tests and then also tips for exams, because when you add that cumulative element, they can be a little bit different. Exams are a little bit harder, require a little bit different of a strategy. So stay tuned to the end and learn how to do both of these. Step number one to taking a test and not stressing is have a schedule of when you're going to study. And I like to personally develop a plan for 2 weeks. And some people will say in that plan, decide what you're going to study each day all at one time and then just follow your plan. But I actually like a different perspective on studying for tests. Always study the thing that you are least prepared for. So if you look at your notes and you say, okay, here's what I'm going to be tested over, and you feel least prepared on this essay, that's where you should start on day one. And then pre-plan your time that you're going to study. Then every time you show up to study the thing that you're least prepared for. This is better because whenever you pre-plan a 2-week study process, you may think that it's going to take you 3 days to study this one topic when it's actually going to take way less time or even way more. But when you just decide, here's the time I'm going to study, then always study the least prepared thing. Eventually, towards the end of your study process, you're going to be really ready for every single topic, and that's the goal. Here's step number 2. Have the right environment. When you have the right environment, it keeps you from being distracted and also allows you to stick to the plan that you determine. So whenever I go to study someplace, I used to use a candle, background music, make sure that my desk was clean. I don't really use the candle as much anymore, but you really want to make sure that you have a strategic environment for studying. Because if you go study somewhere where you're going to get distracted, or you go study in an office and people are always walking by your office wanting to talk to you, that's going to throw you off. And you want to always prioritize people over things. So don't put yourself in a place where you're going to have to tell people that they're less important than your study process. Get somewhere where nobody can reach you. You're basically off the grid so that you can execute your process to the best of your ability. Step 3, have a card next to you while you're studying. You can have a 3x5 card, or if you have like a big monitor, sometimes I'll have like a little notes area up. And if ideas come to you, put them on the notes thing that you have out and then go back to studying. Because sometimes whenever you're studying, you'll get distracted because when you're sitting down trying to focus on a certain topic, you get this idea that, oh, I got to call Joe, or I need to send this email to that person. And those ideas, they need to be captured, but you don't want to jump into handling those ideas while you're studying, because before you know it, you're off track and you're checking emails, and then you're on YouTube, and then the study process you're supposed to be executing is long gone. So have an ability to, or have a card out, have the ability to put ideas down someplace so that you don't have to get distracted and not follow your process. You can also just use your calendar app. Whenever I'm studying, I'll usually have a calendar app open, and then I'll just create an event of the ideas that pop into my head. So I got a call to order the pizza, or got a call to confirm this thing that's going on later this week. I'll just put that in my calendar. That way I can jump right back into studying. Step 4, put questions next to your notes. Whenever I'm studying, I like to use Microsoft OneNote, and I'll put all my notes in one section. And OneNote actually allows you to create multiple columns. So I'll have notes in one section, and then when I go to study, I'll move over just right of the notes and I'll put questions over the notes. That way, whenever I'm studying, I'll just zoom the screen over so that I don't see the answers on the left, which is the notes section. I just see the questions, and I just ask myself questions about the material. The way that I know that I'm ready to take a test is I can answer all the questions on the material that I'm tested over. Whenever I write questions, sometimes I'll make like a little mark on the actual notes column on the left. I'll make like a little question mark, or on OneNote, that has a feature where you can just put a little mark next to each line. That way I know that I've asked all the questions on the material when every line has a question, or every heading, has a question on that left side. And then whenever I do that, I know, okay, there's questions on all the material out to the right. And then I'll go and answer those questions when I'm studying, and I'll be able to see, here's what I know and here's what I don't know. And guys, remember, if you're studying notes and you look and you have all the material right in front of you, our minds tend to tell us that we know the material better than we actually do, causing us to think, oh, I'm ready for the test, show up and then not actually be able to answer all the questions because we're not using active recall. We're just passively reading over the notes. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that when you're studying, you don't have the answers accessible and you can produce them in your brain. And that's also when you learn the most, when your mind goes through that friction of not knowing the answer and then coming up with the answer. It solidifies it in your memory. If you've ever missed a question on a test and you just sat there wondering, man, what is the answer to that question? And then 4 months later or 8 months later or a year later, you still know the answer to that question. That's what happened. Your brain went through that friction of trying to remember the answer, causing it to really be solidified. So you can use that to your advantage when you're studying by just looking at the questions, using active recall, and trying to remember the answers to the questions, making that your study process. Step 5 to taking tests: pre-build potential essays. If your teacher is so gracious enough to let you know what the essay is going to be on, you can go and write those different topics down. They say, hey, here's 5 things that could potentially be an essay. Or if they tell you the essay, that's great. Even if the teacher doesn't tell you, and you know that usually there's essays on these kinds of tests that you're taking, you should go through the notes and decide, here's what I think could be an essay. So create a section where you can type some things out and say, essay number 1, write the heading. Essay number 2, write the heading. And do that for as many potential essays as could be on the test. Then go through and build out how you would write that essay. This is something that like a lot of Harvard students will do, or really, really, really good academic students. They'll know, here's all the things I think could possibly be an essay for this test, and they practice writing out the essay. And then we use the active recall we were talking about earlier. Whenever you go to study, you just look at the essay question, and then you try to write out everything that you know that you already planned. Okay, so you start out essay title, and then you build the essay. You put down all the different things that you want to talk about if that's the question asked. Then put that away and try to just answer the question without having the notes in front of you. Then you realize the gaps in your knowledge when you're studying, and you can go back, and whenever you go back and forth like that, eventually all the essays that could be asked, you have an explanation for, and you can write out in their structure. And that structure is a big deal. So if you can just have 3 or 4 points that you remember under each potential essay, then whenever you get to the test, it's like clockwork. You sit down, you're like, oh yeah, studied that, bam, 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 writing all these things out, and you have a lot better clarity of mind. So pre-build your essays. And step number 6 is studying always takes longer than you think. So try to be ready 3 days early. If you guys have watched this channel before, you know that I like to use a 2-week study process, and I evaluate after that first week, and I decide, does it look like this is enough? Am I missing a certain area of studying for this test that's really going to hurt me? Is there some information I'm really lacking in? Or after I've been studying for a week, does it feel like I'm on a good trajectory to be ready for the test next week? And guys, that reevaluating is a big deal. But when you first start out, you probably won't be able to decide a week ahead of time if your study process is going well. You might just need 3 days. But the point is, you need to plan a time where you evaluate, is what I'm doing enough, or do I need to upscale it? That way you don't end up the day before the test only 70% ready. You don't want to do that. You want to really make sure that you have some way of thinking about and reevaluating that's ahead of time, so that, the day before you don't have to stay up really late. That's what we're trying to avoid. If you're going to do school consistently, or if you're going to learn consistently, then you have to have some kind of a preparation process that keeps you from being last minute, because being last minute will make you miserable and make you want to quit doing school. So make sure that you remember studying takes longer than you think, and have a deadline, 3 days or a week out, whatever, but have a deadline so that you have time to reevaluate and really upscale your studying, and it's not the day before. Step 7 is study earlier in the day. And the point here is study when it's best for you, because some people, their brains aren't great in the early mornings, right? They're more of a night owl. That's fine. We call those green zones. Whatever point in the day that you are best at producing information or sitting down and focusing, use that to your advantage and have that time blocked off. If you're a morning person, great. Get up, do your morning routine, and then have that time where you're studying. And if you're a night person, great. But just make sure that time that you're studying is blocked off. So study in your green zones, and don't study at a time where you're still rebooting or you're super tired. Make sure that you strategically plan not only the amount of time you're going to study every day, but also the time in the day that you're going to study. Step 8 is sleep well, eat well, and exercise. Because guys, if you're not healthy all around, then you're not going to have a healthy brain. It's going to keep you from being able to learn the things that you want to learn as efficient as you want to learn them. So make sure that you're getting whatever amount of sleep that you need. Some people say 6 hours, some people say 8 hours. Okay, sleep as much as you need, and also make sure that you have some kind of a nutrition plan. You don't have to be a health nut and non-GMO, gluten-free and all that. You don't have to do all that stuff, but just make sure that you're not eating all carbs, that you have some kind of a regimen that you stick to so that you eat kind of healthy. I've been listening to a guy recently that says control 2 of the 3 meals every day. Make sure that your breakfast is healthy, high in protein, and your lunch is healthy, high in protein. And even if you can, automate those. Eat the same thing every day. Some people can't do that. I personally, I'm kind of a dry person, so I can do that. It doesn't really bother me. And then have fun with the 3rd meal every day. But you have to have some kind of a routine with your eating so that you put the things in your body that's going to make you have the healthiest brain possible. And then exercise. Guys, healthy bodies lead to healthy minds, and that's a key to taking tests. So we've talked about taking tests, but what about exams? Well, number one, when you're going to take an exam, you want to write down all the info and all the sections that you're responsible for. Then whenever you study, and remember every time you study the thing you're least prepared for, you just make a note, hey, I studied 20 minutes in this section, and you make that note in that place where you put down all the things that you're responsible for. That way you can go, after you've done 7 or 8 study sessions for that test, you can go and see, oh, I haven't studied the introduction of this material yet. Time to go do that. Or I've really been focusing on this area. I need to balance better in the other areas. So if you have those headings out, you're going to be able to see what you've studied. That way you can make sure that you're evenly balancing your studying, and you can up the studying on the difficult areas, and then just make sure that you do some kind of a overview of the areas that you may be more comfortable with. But being able to just look at that outline and see your progress in the different areas is really helpful. Number 2 for exams is know how much the exam is worth. Now, don't use this as an excuse to not really study if the exam isn't worth that much, but just keep in mind, if this exam is worth 50% of your grade, don't mess it up, because that's really going to sink your grade the rest of the semester. So have an idea of how much it's worth so that you can decide what the priority is in your schedule, and you're going to better be able to know what you're preparing for. Step number 3 for exams, this is our last step, is actually learn the material during the semester. Students who show up for the final exam having got a very decent grade on the first few tests are so much better off going into the exam than students who got C's or lower on the first few tests. So if you do really poorly on the first few tests, guys, pay attention to that, because the test is designed to hold you accountable for learning, but also give you an update on where you're at. And if you've done poorly on the first few tests, you have to know that the final exam is gonna be way harder, or the midterm is gonna be way harder if you just kind of wing the first test. So make sure, guys, that you're doing your best all semester long. And you may never have gotten a good grade on an exam before. The cumulative part of the exams really, really scares you. But keep in mind, if you use the other tests during the semester to keep yourself on the right track, the final exam is so much easier to study for. And you can even get way more in the weeds when you are studying for the final exam, even past really what you're supposed to be accountable for. And remember, now you're hitting the goal, because you're not just learning for a test grade, you're actually learning because you're curious and you're developing a perspective on the content that's way past just answering A, B, C, or writing a short little essay. Well, hey guys, I hope this was helpful. This is how to study for tests and for exams without ever stressing again. Use these things, do them one at a time, and you'll be able to take tests without stressing. See you in the next one.